There's a specific threshold that happens after you've done the individual work, after you've changed what you eat, reconsidered the flights, shifted where your money goes, after you've processed the guilt, or at least learned to carry it differently. After you understand the systemic frame, that corporations bear the bulk of this, that the infrastructure was designed to make the lower impact choice harder, that the blame was deliberately redirected onto you. And something still feels unresolved, not guilt, not ignorance, something more precise than either of those. Something like, this is not the right size for the problem. That feeling is accurate, and it deserves more than another list of personal swaps. This video is for the version of you that has hit that threshold and is asking, honestly, what comes next? Not in the abstract, not in the inspirational sense, in the specific sense. Here is what this video will actually do. It will map the full spectrum of what collective climate action includes, because it is not one thing, and most content treats it as if it is. It will show you what the research says about where one person's effort connects to something genuinely larger, and it will close with one specific accessible entry point, something you can take in the next 2 weeks from your actual life, without becoming a different person first. Start with what's true, because this channel does not trade in comfortable half-truths. Individual action matters. The evidence for that is real, and it gets dismissed too easily by people who use systemic framing as a permission structure for doing nothing. A full shift to plant-based eating reduces a person's food-related emissions by roughly 50%. That's documented, measurable, not symbolic. Choosing not to fly reduces individual carbon output more per decision than almost any other single behavioral change available. Energy choices at home, how you bank, where your retirement money sits. These are not nothing, but here is the honest version of what individual action cannot do. It cannot build high-speed rail where none exists. It cannot reprice carbon at the policy level. It cannot restructure the agricultural subsidies that make the plant-based option more expensive in most zip codes. It cannot shift the behavior of the 100 companies whose operations account for the majority of global industrial emissions. Individual action operates within the system. It does not redesign the system. And there is a ceiling. Not because your choices don't matter, but because the problems above that ceiling require a different instrument. The instrument is collective action. And the reason most people who care about climate haven't picked it up yet is not apathy. It is that no one has given them an honest map of what it actually includes. That map is what we're going to look at now. The single biggest obstacle between this audience and collective climate action is a definitional problem. When most people hear collective action, they picture one thing: protest, marches, arrests, megaphones, organizing meetings that run until midnight. That picture is real. It is also one data point on a much wider spectrum, and it happens to be the highest entry cost point on that spectrum. Which means if that's the only picture available, most people with full-time jobs, families, and no existing activist infrastructure will conclude reasonably that collective action is not for them. Here is what the spectrum actually includes. The first mode is information propagation, sharing accurate, evidence-grounded climate information inside the networks you already inhabit. Research on social norm cascades consistently shows that people update their behavior based on what they believe their peers think and do, not primarily based on what strangers or institutions tell them. One person who speaks about climate honestly and specifically inside their existing social network has a documented influence radius that extends well beyond that conversation. The second mode is organizational affiliation, becoming a dues-paying member, recurring donor, or volunteer for an existing climate organization. Not leading, not organizing. Joining. The financial and operational health of effective climate advocacy organizations depends on this kind of participation, and the entry cost is as low as $15 a month and 2 hours of attention. The third mode is civic participation. Local government, school boards, utility commissions, planning and zoning processes. This is the most underutilized lever available to ordinary people without political connections, because local decisions about land use, building codes, transit investment, and energy infrastructure have direct, traceable climate implications, and local officials respond to constituent contact at rates that federal-level contact rarely achieves. The fourth mode is workplace and institutional leverage, using whatever role you hold inside an organization to move that organization's climate-relevant decisions. Procurement policy, vendor standards, building efficiency, investment policy for institutional funds. The research on this consistently shows that employees with subject matter knowledge and persistence produce institutional changes that no amount of individual consumer behavior can replicate. The fifth mode is electoral participation, not campaign volunteering as a full-time commitment, but targeted, high-leverage electoral engagement in races where climate policy is a genuine variable. Down-ballot races, local ballot measures, primaries where turnout is low enough that a small number of votes produces a large effect. These 5 modes are not equivalent in impact. They are not equivalent in entry cost. And most people can enter at least one of them without structural disruption to their existing life. The question the research helps answer is, which one, for someone starting from where you are, produces the most leverage per unit of effort? There is a concept in climate policy research called the social tipping point. It refers to the threshold at which a minority behavior, a practice, a norm, a demand, crosses into the mainstream fast enough to restructure how the majority operates. The research on this, particularly work coming out of the Climate Social Science Network and parallel modeling done at the Potsdam Institute, suggests that these tipping points don't require majority adoption to trigger. They require a critical, committed minority. Estimates vary, but figures between 10 and 25% of a population consistently appear as the threshold at which norm change accelerates beyond the pace of individual persuasion. What that means in practice is this. The question was never whether one person is big enough for the problem. The question is whether enough people are participating in the right modes, in the right places, to cross the threshold that changes what the majority treats as normal. And that is a different kind of question, because it has a different kind of answer. The answer is not, quit your job and become a full-time organizer. The answer is, find the threshold your participation contributes to and show up there, consistently, at whatever level your actual life allows. Here is where the research becomes specific, in a way most climate content avoids. Studies on political responsiveness at the local level, including work from the Analyst Institute and Yale Program on Climate Change Communication, consistently show that local elected officials are highly responsive to constituent contact on specific issues, particularly when that contact is organized, repeated, and locally grounded. A city council member in a mid-sized American city who receives 30 emails about a specific land use decision from constituents in their district will treat that differently from 30 emails on a national issue. 30 is not a large number. It is a book club. It is a neighborhood association. It is a group text between people who already know each other. The gap between I care about climate and I participate in collective climate action is not primarily a gap of time or resources. It is a gap of legibility, of not having a clear enough picture of where the door is. The honest version of collective climate action looks like one person in one specific mode at one specific local level showing up consistently enough that their participation becomes part of a threshold that is being crossed right now in thousands of places by people who also didn't think they were the right size for the problem. That is what this looks like. That is what your role in it can be. If this video opens something you want to take further, there's a resource in the description that structures exactly this work. It maps all 5 participation modes into a practical framework, what each one looks like in practice, how to find your highest leverage entry point based on your specific situation, and action templates for taking a first step in each. It's called the Civic Footprint Playbook. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. The video gave you the map. The playbook gives you the navigation. Here is where this gets concrete. Because a map without a starting position is still just a map. Based on what the research shows about leverage, entry cost, and the specific profile of someone who has made it to this point in a video like this one, the entry point most likely to produce both real impact and sustained participation is the third mode, civic participation at the local level, not because it is the only door, because it is the door with the lowest lock. Here is what that actually looks like in the next 2 weeks. First, find out what decision-making body in your municipality is currently handling any of the following: building codes and energy efficiency standards, local transportation or transit planning, utility choice or community solar programs, land use and zoning for density or green space. This takes about 20 minutes. Every municipality has a website. Every meeting agenda is public. Most have a comment period, in person or submitted in writing, that requires no prior relationship, no organizing experience, and no political identity. Second, submit one comment, written or in person, on one specific agenda item, grounded in the evidence this video gave you and whatever local knowledge you already have. That is it. That is the first step. Not because one comment changes the outcome of one meeting. Because the research is consistent on this. Officials track constituent engagement by issue, not by individual. Repeated contact from a small number of constituents on a specific issue creates a record that shapes how that issue is weighted in future decisions. The first comment is not the action. It is the beginning of a pattern, and patterns are what produce the threshold affects the research documents. The objection this raises is the one worth naming directly. I don't have time for this. Here is what the data on effective minimum civic participation actually looks like. Studies on constituent contact and local electoral engagement consistently show that 2 to 4 hours per month of targeted, consistent participation at the local level on specific issues produces measurable effects on local policy outcomes over a 12 to 18-month window. 2 to 4 hours per month, that is 1 afternoon, or 4 lunch breaks, or a Sunday morning every other week. That is not a heroic commitment. It is a reallocation. And it connects specifically, documentably, in ways that individual consumption choices structurally cannot, to the level at which climate decisions are actually made. If you want a structured way to take this further, the Civic Footprint Playbook in the description lays out the full framework, 5 participation modes, entry point selection guide, and action templates for the first step in each. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. And before we close, what has been the biggest obstacle between you and collective climate action? And does anything in this video shift that? Drop it in the comments. That conversation matters. Here is where things actually are. The individual work you've done is real. The guilt you processed, the choices you shifted, the honest accounting of what your consumption produces, that is not nothing. It is, in fact, the necessary precondition for what comes next. But it has a ceiling. And you felt that ceiling. What's above it is not reserved for a different kind of person. It is not contingent on having activist infrastructure, political connections, or a temperament for confrontation. It is available to someone who knows one local decision is being made right now that has a direct climate implication. Who submits one comment? Who shows up once? Who does that again and again until it becomes a pattern? And the pattern becomes part of a threshold being crossed in hundreds of communities simultaneously. That is not a metaphor. That is the mechanism the research describes. The question you arrived with, does anything I do connect to something real at this scale, has an honest answer, and it is not the clean one most content gives you. The honest answer is individual action alone does not. Collective participation, even at minimum effective dose, demonstrably does. And the distance between where you are right now and the first meaningful step into that participation is not a character gap. It is a calendar gap. 20 minutes to find the meeting. 1 afternoon to show up. Not as reassurance, as a more accurate description of your actual situation. You are not too small for this. You are looking for the wrong door. The right one is local, specific, and open right now. That is where this goes next. The rest can come from there. You are imperfect and coherent. That cost gets named. And it is enough to start from.